Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Bartels. I'm the Chief Development Officer from Becker LLC, and today I have the pleasure of re-interviewing one of my very close friends and fellow industry partners, Kerri Quigley from Marsh, from MMA Assurance, or is it Assurance MMA now?
Well, actually, it's Kerri Sullivan now.
Kerri Sullivan. That's
And
right. I apologize.
it's Assurance or MMA Midwest or whatever you want to call us.
I will stay with Assurance for this. Let's make it easier. So let me start by saying congratulations on your promotion. I would love to start our conversation with you telling your story of how you grew at Assurance from an account manager in 2011 to today, where you are now the staffing practice and PEO leader. So tell me your story.
Yeah, actually, I started all the way back in 2008 at Assurance. So I had been in the insurance industry for two other brokerages for the first 2 years of my career. And then started at Assurance as an account manager on our staffing team. I've been on our staffing team the entirety of my time at Assurance, which is the last 14 years. So I started on the servicing side. I was an account manager for a few years before I became an account executive. I was an account executive for, I believe, around 3 to 5 years. I can't remember the exact number, before I decided to become a producer and had my own book of clients and business and kind of step away from what I had been working on and go out and produce for myself and generate my own clients. And then recently, as of this last April 1st, with our prior practice leader, Diane Poljak, actually becoming the president of MMA Midwest, I moved into the practice leader position. And it's been interesting. You know, I think every position I've been in here has not necessarily been with an eye on like, oh, what's next? I think every job I've had, I've said like, oh, this is the right fit for me. And then I kind of get to that comfort level and that point of kind of seeing like, hey, maybe this would be the thing that would make sense for me to do next. And I've been really fortunate to work at an organization where I've always felt recognized for what my skills are, what my potential is. I mean, at the point in time, I made two of my career transitions into different roles. I think it was maybe the first time we had done those particular transitions internally. So there wasn't a career path, a roadmap that had been pre-established before I had done it. But I just always had really supportive managers and mentors that have kind of encouraged me to go for the next step in my career. And it's paid off really well. And now, as the practice leader, I get to have experienced our team from, you know, a variety of different positions and responsibilities and really seen it kind of from all sides, which I think really colors the way that I approach my role and the way that I see things, and kind of, I think that the balance with which I look at situations, because I've worn a lot of hats here. So it's been great.
That's excellent. You know, now as the new practice leader, how do you envision mentoring the next generation of teams at Assurance to continue your growth going forward?
It's interesting. I think we're at a good point in kind of moving towards like what's the next generation. Where do we kind of take it to the next step? It's nice for me to feel like I kind of get a fresh set of eyes on things. It's an interesting point in our time because we've become part of Marsh McLennan agencies within the past 2 years. So it's sort of taking this practice that we've had for, you know, the last 20 plus years that's been well established within staffing and pairing that up with a lot of additional resources. You know, Marsh is the world's largest brokerage, and there's a lot of, you know, leverage and tools and resources that come along with that. And so it's a really great opportunity for us to figure out, like, how do we harness that and really deploy that to provide value to our staffing clients? What do we build out and make our practice look like throughout the entirety of the organization? We've got sort of some, you know, more tenured individuals who've been here for a long period of time. And then we have sort of, you know, newer talent that's been rising in the organization. I think that I have, I have an interesting sort of skill set because of my background.
Right.
I didn't start out as a producer, so I view things through maybe a different lens than maybe your average producer would be. But I think that I'm a really good counterbalance to, kind of our next generation as they're coming up, in helping them be, well-rounded, consultative, strategic brokers, which, that execution and that servicing and that retention of our clients in the long term and the relationships we build, as opposed to, hey, just that sales savvy on the front end, those are really the things that make us successful. But I mean, it's kind of continuing on with the things that we've always done too. Thought leadership is so important to us. We're deep in this industry. We want to continue to be deep in this industry. We want to be an advocate for this industry. I have conversations with insurance carriers all the time, advocating for why they should want to work with staffing firms, which they normally kind of start out of the position of, it's not really within our wheelhouse. And then just the education we do for our clients to help them, be better. I think it's not enough to just write someone's insurance. It's about, like, how do we partner with you to help you grow your business? How do we help you become better over the years that we're working together, and, helping you kind of move into the future?
No, I've been very fortunate to work with with Assurance, yourself, and a lot of your colleagues for well over 15 years now. And I can honestly say your thought leadership is heads and tails above what a lot of other companies do today. One thing is that you and Diane Polachek are fantastic examples of how Assurance promotes from within. And in my opinion, more importantly, as women leaders. How important is this to you personally? And how do you envision further promoting women within the industry?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's important to me that, women have equal opportunity to men in the workplace. I love to see, women elevated within an organization, and within our internal executive team. I think women make up about 50% of the executives. Yeah, so it's a really, really even split, and a good dynamic group with, like, really widely varied, opinions and perspectives. For, people are very candid with each other. So I think there's just tremendous value in having a lot of different viewpoints, whether that's, male, female, your background, who you are. I think anytime you kind of get that diversity of opinion and worldview and perspective, it's a positive thing. But I think we really just need to continue to look towards, like, identifying, our talent internally, like, kind of doing the same things I experienced as I was coming up. I benefited from strong mentorship. Like, I really, truly would not be where I am in my career today if I didn't have the support of a couple really key mentors. And those mentors were both men and women. So, I'm part of ASA's Women in Leadership Council, which has been really great for me to participate in. And actually, we're having some men participate in this year as well, because it is actually important for men to be a part of this process of mentorship of women as well. It's not just, female to female, it's male to female. One of my most impactful mentors, was a man. On the flip side, my other most impactful mentor was, my boss, Diane, who's a woman. So, I've benefited from it from both sides. But, in general, I think you kind of meet people where they are. You look at people as individuals. That's something I think about a lot as, a leader. Not everybody is the same. Not everyone wants the same things from their career. Not everyone is even on the same page at different points in their career with what they want. And I think, maybe one of the added things you think about a lot with women is, just around, raising a family. And, like, you'd see women take a step back at certain points, depending on what's going on. You have to be cognizant of the challenges that come with that, especially some of them that have popped up in COVID. Those have been incredible challenges for anyone that's had little kids at home. It's extremely challenging for people to find childcare. So I think it's about what can you do to be flexible as an employer? What can you do to be understanding and know that not everybody is on the same path? And we all will kind of have different priorities at different points in our life. At some point, it may be full bore with your career. At other points, it may be you want to kind of take a step back and be more involved in what's going on with my kids, or just taking care of an elder aging parent, elderly family member. There are a lot of things where there's this interplay with, like, where does your career fit in with your life as a whole? And I think assurance in general is just a really compassionate organization that really does treat people as individuals and kind of see where they're at and try to make things work for you at whatever point in life you're in. We have a lot of young people who start working in the organization and do what I do and kind of live out their careers here. And we go through all different phases of life. So yeah, it's just kind of being flexible as you go through that and meeting the needs of people where they're at.
That's excellent. And I'm so glad to hear that, because again, I've worked with your group for 15 years and I've seen the fantastic work-life balance you guys have. And, seeing the women growth within your company is fantastic. All right, let's jump into the industry. With all the growth we've seen over the past 2 years, it's amazing. Once we got through COVID, the industry seems to still be exploding.
Yeah.
How has assurance adjusted with this growth with your clients? Because you guys have a big book of clients, so I imagine this has been very challenging.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I would say, once the first initial months of COVID, it was definitely a little chaotic. Just keeping up with everything that was going on, all the new, trends and legislation and changes. And as our clients were adapting to all these things, it's settled a bit. And then it's, our clients just took off and really have been booming, especially in certain industry sectors. So obviously, we want to make sure that we're obviously staffed up and able to service at the same standards that we, have always been able to do. A lot of what we do has to kind of ties back to our advocacy for the industry with the insurance carrier partners we work with. We're in a hard liability market right now. Not a lot of liability options for staffing carriers. And as our clients are kind of having increased opportunities in front of them and needs that they need to fill, and contractual requirements are increasing, at the flip side, you have capacity decreasing and less insurance carrier options and kind of maybe more underwriting hoops to jump through. So, it's about us continuing to be the advocates for our clients to say, hey, this is what we need to get done for them to be able to pursue this work, to go after this project. We have to find the creative solutions that allow them to do what they need to do. And then, we've really, I think, delved into kind of some sub niches within staffing. There are a couple that have really, really boomed. IT staffing is growing a lot, but healthcare staffing is
it's incredible,
astronomically right now. And at some points during COVID, it was extraordinarily hard to insure. And even right now, okay, it's opened back up. There's still not a ton of options within that space. And we have some individuals on our team who are incredibly well-versed in the ins and outs of that specific discipline within the staffing industry as a whole. And are really just familiar with even, beyond insurance, what are the things that are impactful to those organizations, talk about things like, mental health and burnout, particularly within the medical profession, references to compassion fatigue and everything based on what they've experienced. Even beyond insurance, there are all these other different factors that we kind of need to loop into what we're doing, whether it be with wellness or benefits or communication. So we've really tried to keep up with what's going on, not just within the staffing industry as a whole, but, even getting further down to these kind of sub-disciplines that we specialize in.
Yeah, it is a lot. It is a lot.
Yeah.
And, risk is clearly a major concern to owners in this industry. Mitigating the risk, proper
Yeah.
risk management they're key to keeping your staffing firm successful and going in the right direction. What is Assurance doing right now to continue this trend, and how are you advising your clients to minimize risk?
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably on the workers' compensation side, a lot of challenges remain just with the tight employment marketplace. You just have to be cognizant that you're continuing to, set the same sort of hiring standards and practices that you would in, if unemployment was not what it was right now. Because those are important for kind of managing your risks around, employment practices, liability claims, workers' compensation claims. You have to sort of not relax those controls, even though it may feel like you need to be able to execute on what your clients need for you at the end of the day. I would say key, and Mike, I've been banging this drum for years.
I know where you're going.
I always come back to contracts. I mean, it's interesting because the trend, I think, is to push more and more and more and more liability on the staffing firms for things that I look at and go, like, how can they even remotely be responsible for that? Like, how can you feasibly even take responsibility for that or control or manage that risk? So one of the biggest things that staffing firms can do is read those contracts, understand what they're being asked for, be equipped with how to negotiate for what's appropriate, find out what your client's driving at. Because when an attorney is putting that together, they're going to ask for the moon. Sorry, Mike, knocking the attorneys a little bit.
I'm not an attorney. I'm not offended.
But you may ask for the moon, and sometimes you kind of have to get to the core of what's the concern here, what's the circumstance that we're aiming to ensure, and what's reasonable and what's palatable. Because sometimes to jump through all of these hoops contractually, you're looking at a situation where, geez, maybe our markup isn't even going to cover the cost for the additional insurance, or we're assuming an uninsurable risk that if something happened, it could bankrupt us. And it's not something even we can control because it's entirely within the client's realm of control. A lot of what's difficult to manage right now is around, liability considerations. I mean, workers' compensation is always a concern, but market conditions drive really where the focus is. And the workers' compensation marketplace has been relatively soft for a number of years. The liability market has been hard. I mean, with particular outliers in certain areas, employment practices liability, cyber liability, in some cases, auto liability, that are really, really challenging. So the area of risk management, it's not just, hey, I did a walkthrough and I checked for this machine guarding and this JSA and everything. It goes beyond that. It's, what are your clients doing related to their HR practices? What are their hiring and firing practices? How are they managing on site? What would they do if there was an allegation of, discrimination or sexual harassment? And then, what sort of controls are there around, computer systems and remote access, especially because the cyber liability market is, not great and not looking to die down anytime soon unless claims stop happening, which is not really where the trend's at right now.
No, and that's kind of what I was going to ask you next, is with the cyber attacks and cybersecurity is continuing to be such a big concern for the industry because of, there's such pertinent information that cannot get out there and needs to be protected. How are you in particular advising your clients with this, and what can management put into place to safeguard themselves, at least with an insurance policy of something with this cyber liability?
Yeah, we actually were a little bit ahead of this because like kind of a few years before things really started getting bad within the cyber liability market, we had established an executive risk team who basically specializes in this area. So they are really, really deep in the cyber liability market and in the controls surrounding it. So kind of similar to the ways that we had evaluated our clients' safety practices, where we did what was called a safety 360 and did a deep dive into, hey, what are you doing to control, your workers' compensation? We also have what we call a cyber 360, which is basically a deep dive, but on the cyber liability side. And it's looking into all of your IT controls and practices. We've got a list of 12 practices that are really, really, really key for clients to have in place, not just because it's going to protect them from breaches, but because without some of those things, you can be next to uninsurable within the cyber liability market. I mean, if you don't have multi-factor authentication around your remote access to, email and servers, it's an automatic declination in a lot of cases, or, maybe it's a 400% delta in what you would pay for premium. So there are some really, really key core controls. And it's been interesting because I don't necessarily feel like I've seen folks within the cybersecurity or maybe, outsourced IT needs sector looking at it with the same level of maybe like urgency and importance as the insurance marketplace has been driving it. So it's, the insurance marketplace is demanding these things before the point in time, even that some of the IT administrators are saying like, yeah, we really have to roll this out as a protection. But I think my biggest recommendation in that area is get on top of it early. I mean, if there are cyber controls that need to be addressed and corrected, it is not necessarily something you fix in a day. I mean, it can require getting new software, completely changing systems. It can take time and energy. It's something you have to do well in advance of your renewal and make sure that you're as well covered as you can be, before you get to that point of, negotiating, filling out applications, getting quotes. And it's way too late at that point to try to start correcting any issues. And then just clients should be really cognizant of what they're being asked for in terms of cyber liability limits. I mean, and maybe this is a counter for an insurance broker to say, but you don't always necessarily have to buy the larger limits. I mean, just because someone asks for it doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually what's appropriate for your organization and your size and the relative risk that's there. And as cyber liability limits increase, I mean, even needing $5 million or $3 million in cyber liability can be extremely expensive. We're in sort of an inverse market right now where normally when you buy liability insurance, it's that first layer that's the most expensive. So the first $1 million is more expensive than the next $1 million, then the next, then the next, then the next, because of the likelihood that something actually hits that level. Cyber liability is actually the first layer is expensive, and then all the layers that go on top of it are successively more expensive. So going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 just sort of grows exponentially, and you likely can't find it with one carrier. You may have to layer different carriers on top of each other. So there's this whole balance of, obviously you want to be insured, you want to cover your risk. You also have to be cognizant of your costs, and you have to, if you have $3 million in cyber and that is adequate for your organization, your risk tolerance, and you've got one client that asks you for a $5 million limit, you have to really evaluate whether the cost is supported by the profit that you're making from that client before you just agree to increase that limit, because it might have been $2,000 5 years ago, but it could be $50,000 now. It's a dramatically different market. So there are ways to control it, but it's about kind of keeping that cognizance in the back of your mind and saying, this is the marketplace we're in. It's not just something I can go get done quickly, or I've got to plan for this and get ahead of it. I've got a budget knowing for what my cyber increase is going to be and be prepared to have those conversations with clients or prospects.
Yeah, it's not a one size fits all situation with this at all.
No.
And there's, like you said, there's so many faceted layers to it. It makes it a lot more difficult. Do you see any drastic changes in coverage that staffing owners and management should be preparing for in the immediate future?
I hope not.
No, I do too.
Generally, when we're looking at drastic changes in coverage, it's because someone's decided they don't want to cover something that's happening because it's a claim that we're seeing coming up. We've gone through a lot of things like that. It's interesting as different legislation comes out at a state level, where all of a sudden you're being held responsible for things you weren't held responsible for before, then it kind of becomes this scramble on the insurance side to say, well, quick, are we going to exclude that? Are we going to be silent on it? Are we going to affirmatively offer coverage? And so a lot of it is just sort of shifting to keep pace with what's happening at a legislative level within particular states or at a federal level, and whether or not it keeps pace with that. Yeah, I mean, if I had a crystal ball here, I would just keep my eye on cyber. I would keep my eye on employment practices liability. I would just say that staffing firms really need to, anything they can do to, one, have an understanding of what their controls are, what their exposures really are, like know what you have out there, know what's being done to prevent certain kinds of things from happening in the workplace. But yeah, it kind of goes on with, continuing to pay close attention to contracts. I would say that the trend in the industry right now in general is reduction of coverage, reduction of limits, less capacity, scaling back. We're not really in a broadening, adding new coverage, ready access to limits. We're in, a tight marketplace where things are kind of slowly rolling back, and got to look for excess more often. We've got to talk about contractual controls. In some cases, we have to talk about just knowingly assuming uninsured risk. I mean, every business has uninsured risk. Your insurance policies are written with all these terms and conditions and exclusions. Business owners take risks that's not covered by insurance every single day. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's about knowingly taking those risks and doing it within, a mindset that makes sense for whatever the owners or the management team's individual risk tolerances. Look, balance of risk versus reward, right? In every decision. So, a lot of it is just that awareness of where we are, awareness that, market conditions affect, maybe painful for you, but they affect your competitors as well. And just sort of knowing where you stand within the industry as a whole, and kind of being prepared to pivot as you need to, come up with some creative solutions, enter into conversations with your clients as much as you can, to just be flexible. That's what I would say.
Wow, that is fantastic advice. And, I think we covered everything here. Kerri, I just cannot thank you enough for your time with this today. It's always a pleasure to sit down and do this with you. And from the bottom of my heart, congratulations. This is such a well-deserved promotion. And I look forward to doing this again with you very soon.
Thanks, Mike. I enjoy it. Hopefully other people enjoy it too.
I'm sure they will. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.